Behind us, we have left clear genetic footprints leading back to the One Out of Africa movement 80,000 years ago. 10,000 miles away on the other side of the globe, and 6,000 years later, the invasion of the New World would begin. The world was cooling down again as the new ice age began. Modern humans have found one place to settle. Our genetic lines now spread in all directions from the one southern out of Africa route. And the last remaining frontier of America now has us trekking north from India and Southeast Asia and China, and east from the Mongol steppes in Siberia, converging at the Bering Straits, the fragile strip of land joining Asia with America. For a long time, archaeologists insist no one had reached America before 15,000 years ago. But new information from the DNA genetic trail has our American ancestors crossing the Beringia land bridge from Asia 25 to 20,000 years ago. This is the last great journey to populate the world, and the genetic lines all lead to one goal. These are the first Americans. "25,000 years ago, the world was moving into one of the worst ice ages we'd ever have to endure. In places, the ice was 3 miles thick. But as the ice closes in, this is the last possible moment before it shuts off the land route from the Bering Straits into Alaska and the rest of North America. It would be another 8,000 years before it would open up again.
The reason why we know that these first Native Americans got in about 20,000 years ago is the fact that we know which founding types they brought with them, which mitochondrial founding types they brought with them from Asia. We have types in Asia which are similar to American types, and therefore we know the ones that actually came into America as opposed to those which derived since the arrival in America. Now, on average, the founders in America have accumulated one mutation. And since we know the mutation rate for our genetic system, the mitochondria, is one mutation every 20,000 years, we know that these founder types have been evolving in America for 20,000 years, and that is when they must have arrived.
In North America, the Great Laurentian Ice Sheet smothered the Central Plains, destroying everything in its path, forcing our migrants down the west coast into South America. As the ice retreated, we could spread back into the liberated land. There's evidence of a settlement at a rock shelter on the Ohio River in Pennsylvania called Meadowcroft.
Meadowcroft is very important here to the American story because it is dated at about 16,000 uncalibrated radiocarbon years before today, and is therefore one of the earliest Native American sites to be credited by archaeologists. And this ties in wonderfully with our genetic estimates, because they must have come in several thousand years before that in order to get down to Meadowcroft.
Dr. James Addavagio led the team of scientists who excavated the shelter.
When we originally encountered it, we assumed it would not contain any cultural material whatsoever. But as it turned out, there were an assortment of artifacts and other indications of a human presence several thousands of years previous to what the estimate for the maximum age for the peopling of the New World was. Scattered across this surface and deeper occupation surfaces in and around these fireplaces are a series of artifacts, among the more notable of which are blade core fragments like this, and the blades that have been struck from these cores. What's unique about these items is that not only are they not manufactured for the most part by later Paleo-Indian groups in the Americas, but they bear a striking resemblance to blade cores from northern China that are 28 or 29,000 years old. In fact, casts of these materials could be lost in collections from North China, and you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. What the evidence from Meadowcroft suggests to us is, along with data from an emerging series of sites elsewhere in North America, is that there was no single migration of human beings to the New World, as was recently postulated in the last 2 decades, but instead a series of pulses or emanations.
So multiple entries are now established as the pattern for American migration. These earliest settlers carried many different genetic lines. They came from Siberia, China, Central Asia, as far south as Malaysia and Japan. In 1996, a skeleton known as Kennewick Man was discovered along the Columbia River in Washington State. When it was brought to Jim Chatters, the forensic anthropologist, he first believed the remains were those of a 19th century pioneer. He was astonished when radiocarbon dating revealed it to be 9,500 years old. It was the oldest skeleton ever found in North America. But what really intrigued Chatters was that despite his age, Kennewick Man did not resemble modern Native Americans. His skull was Caucasoid, not Mongoloid, and reconstruction of his face showed distinct similarities with the Ainu, who lived in northern Japan.
Kennewick Man was an extremely beaten-up individual. He had multiple broken ribs. He had an injured left arm. He had some injury to his skull. He had some arthritis in his neck, his knees, his elbows. Just generally been around the block a few times. But what was most distinctive about him, the most interesting injury, I guess, from a forensic standpoint, is that he had a spear point embedded in his pelvis. In fact, that's what caused us to radiocarbon date the bones. All it can be seen is a little ovoid window in each side of the bone. But when we CAT scan it, we can see that there's a 2-inch long, 1-inch wide, 1/4-inch thick serrated edge blade in there. Now, what's interesting about this spear point is that it's of a style that we only see after this man's death in eastern Washington. We can see that style moving down the coast of British Columbia into Washington around 10,000 years ago and on to 9,000 years ago. That's radiocarbon years. The people who bring this spear point, who are the ones that we find with this style of spear point a short distance later in time, are very similar to modern American Indians. You could lose them in a crowd easily of American Indian skulls. So what it looks like is we have a new population arriving with Northeast Siberian characteristics that is beginning to replace the earlier arriving immigrants. Now, what this suggests in a broader way is that there was some sort of conflict going on. And the fact that it occurs at the time of the new arriving populations, the fact that Kennewick Man looks different from the new arriving populations, both suggest that it's a competition over territory that's at issue. Now, from the angle of entry, from the velocity of entry, it's fairly clear that this spear was coming directly at him, and that he could see it coming.
Professor Chattis believed that Kennewick Man died by hypothermia and drowning. Since the death of Kennewick Man, modern human populations have swelled from thousands to millions. We have advanced from primitive hunter-gatherers to farmers and traders, townspeople and city folk, and from tribal domains to empires. In 5,000 generations, we have arrived in the modern world we know today. Since the 1980s, DNA samples have been taken from thousands of people all over the world, from Alaska to New Zealand, from the Inuit to Icelanders. By analyzing them, scientists can trace similarities between personal pin codes and see which people are most closely related. All individuals can check their mitochondrial DNA and trace the routes their ancestors took in their journey around the world, from Africa to every corner of the globe. In Chicago, we sampled 5 people who are tracing their mitochondrial tree. After analyzing their DNA swabs, scientists discovered a remarkable connection between a Greek and a Native American. Angela Trachis is a Greek who came to the United States from Europe. Leonard Malatari is a Native American full-blooded Cree. They are both from the same small and rare branch of our family tree and share a common ancestor 30,000 years ago, maybe in southern Siberia. As modern humans populated the empty world after leaving Africa, some went north to central Russia. There a daughter was born, carrying a new marker, X. Her children separated, some going west into Europe, and some east from Siberia and on into America. Trachis and Malatari arrived in America from opposite ends of the earth, and now meet for the first time in Chicago. Their first family reunion in 30,000 years of our evolutionary history.
It kind of blows, it just blows me away.
Well, I think it's really exciting that we all come from the same line, because maybe then people will forget about putting so much emphasis on differences and talking about the common person, and then maybe that'll help people be a little bit more tolerant and loving, and maybe that'll progress in maybe more of a relevant manner than just science, maybe just about humanity in general. So I think that's very relevant today.
Years ago, a tiny group of modern humans braved the terrors of the Red Sea and left Africa forever. They carried with them the future of the world. By 10,000 years ago, they had penetrated every corner of the globe. The most incredible and important journey we have ever made. For the first time, we now know who we are. We know where we come from. We know we are the same people as our restless and inquisitive ancestors, but we have reached the end of our migration. There are no more empty lands.